everybody, and this is my first ever anime review. I just want to let everybody know that the clip I'm using in the background is from Persona 5, the game itself. So I'm not using any clips from the anime because I don't want to be like copyright strike or anything like that, but I'm using the clips from the game, in particular my own playthrough of this game, which I have on my channel, so it's in the playlist if you want to check it out. So that's what I'm using as the background for all my reviews. Alright, let's get started. And I'm doing it for Persona 5 Animation Episode 1, which just came out about a couple weeks ago. And for those of you who are not familiar with Persona 5, it's a really long running series, mostly in game format, but it's been out you know, since last year. Persona 5 has been out since last year, and they've been building over the years, you know, really establishing Persona as a really premier RPG and social simulation type game. And Persona 5 just really blew it out of the water, so much so that the creators decided to make an anime based off Persona 5. And Persona 5 really did a really good job. I mean, there's no denying that it's a really good game. It's not for everybody, but if you're really into that type of game and animes, you know, things like that, then you really like it. And the thing I like about Persona 5 is that it kind of reflects modern society. You know, these aren't like, you know, Super Saiyans or, you know, ninjas from the Ratu village. These are teenagers that, you know, come into possession of powers through the other world, the metaverse, and as a result, they're using it to fix things that are wrong in society, things that, you know, politicians, police officers, governors are not able to fix. And as a result, it creates an interesting political climate. You know, like, what would you do if you had such a power to change, you know, all the bad doing? It kind of reminds me a lot of Death Note, to be honest. Like, it's similar fashion where, you know, in Death Note, you know, he had the book, and then he pretty much was trying to eliminate all evildoers, but then he himself became evil. So I'm kind of curious to see if they'll follow that path for you know, the first season of Persona 5. Hopefully it does good where to have a second season, but you know, regardless, I'm gonna definitely want this season, you know, series to continue past just one season. And I'm curious to see how many episodes are gonna be in the first season, because in the Persona 5 is a really long game. Like, I've already spent over 60 hours in this game, and I'm not even halfway done. So you can see there's a lot of source materials, you know, and a lot of things for them to do. And the funny thing is, a lot of these side missions where you have to boost your rank, your strength with your confidants or your partners, you know, those would technically be considered side missions. But in order for you to succeed and be stronger in Persona 5, you kind of need to do that to some extent. So I'm curious to see how they do that in the anime. But the good thing is that, you know, episode 1, it starts off, so episode 1, it starts off pretty much exactly where the Persona 5 game starts. And they actually gave the characters a name, so he does have a name. He didn't, you know, it's not some randomly generated name. So his name is Ren Amamiya, if I'm saying that correctly. You know, apologies for fans, because a lot of these names, I never really like practice saying it out loud. But, you know, now that I'm doing a review for the anime, I'm gonna, of course, practice and get better at pronouncing these words. So, you know, the episode 1 recap, or should I say outline, is after high school student Ren, I'm just gonna call him Ren. So after high school student Ren gets in trouble with the police, he's labeled as a juvenile delinquent, and as a part of his probation, he's forced to start living with Sojiro Sakura, which is interesting last name, because, you know, Sojiro and his last name is Sakura, which sounds like a female name. So, but, you know, that's his caretaker right now. And he's an old man that likes to, you know, tell him not to get in trouble. But, you know, a stranger who agreed to take him in, pretty much. And while walking to his new school, well, pretty much what happens is, while Ren is on his way to his new school, Ren becomes lost in another world. And that's how the first episode picks up. And the cool thing is that it starts at exactly where the Phantom Thieves, you know, in the present are already established, they're already well known, and they're currently in a heist. And they're more than likely trying to create a distraction for them to get either a distortion for the target that they're trying to change your heart, or create some kind of opening to steal something that is valuable to the target, so that way when they go to the other world, his shadow version is distorted and they're able to attack him and change his heart or steal his treasure. Which is kind of how it plays out. So it's very long and complex in terms of how they actually change somebody's change somebody's heart. I might do a video on that separately, but I definitely wanted to at least start off slow by just doing a review and maybe doing like preview for the next episode. And as you know, this evolves, I might do more in-depth stuff. But for right now, I'm going to keep it simple. And for those who want to talk Persona 5 and start a discussion, this is definitely the video for you. And so the good thing is, excellent choice in the voice acting. I particularly like Igor's voice when you meet him in the Velvet Room. It has the right amount of cynicism, I used to say, or sinisterness, whatever you want to call it. But you can tell that he's going to be one of, you know, and spoiler alert, if you haven't already played a game, you know that Igor, you can tell he's not a good guy. So there's no need to spoil that, but I won't go into detail in terms of what happens later on. But I'm just curious to see how that arc plays out at the end of the season. And then, of course, I like that all of the characters in Persona 5 are pretty much true to who they were in the game. You know, Fox, Anna, Morgana, Skull, you know, even Sojiro, which he isn't a Phantom Thieves, he's the caretaker. But all the characters so far, in whether they're Phantom Thieves or caretakers, so far everybody seems to be playing almost exactly how their character is, you know, portrayed in the game. So there's no difference I've noticed so far. One thing that did strike me a little interesting though, in the interrogation scene after Joker was apprehended, so Joker does get captured, and it follows the same plot as the game. So you know, in the beginning he gets captured and then the police start interrogating him, but the interrogation scene was much more brutal in the anime to highlight just, I think they're going for a level of maturity. And not that the game isn't mature, the game is pretty mature. You know, they talk about a lot of like really high level stuff that most animes don't talk about, like, you know, sexual harassment, you know, drugs, like real life stuff that people, but they're putting in anime format. So I'm kind of curious to see how mature they're gonna go. I mean, they even talk about prostitution in the game. Are they gonna talk about that in the anime? Don't know, but I'm just curious to see how they're gonna, you know, show that, how they're gonna, you know, bring that to fold in the anime media. And so it's just kind of cool. So Najima, of course, you know, she's there to interrogate him, and she's the sister of one of, well, I'm not gonna spoil that part, but I don't want to go into too much detail. But so Najima is interrogating Ren, aka Joker, and she mentions that, you know, you also seem to know about the other worlds, or world of worlds, and maybe I'm slightly paraphrasing, but it seems like she is a little bit aware of the other world already. And I don't know, maybe I missed that when I first started playing Phantom Thieves in Persona 5. Maybe I missed that part because I thought she didn't know about the other world. So maybe she does, and that's maybe something I missed because, again, I've played over 50 hours in Persona 5, so I can't exactly remember every single conversational choice. So, you know, that's something I probably have to look back at. But that's kind of interesting that at the beginning she's already aware of that. So I'm wondering if they're condensing things to make it be a bit more speedy, because even in the first episode, at the end of the episode, you know, Joker, or Ren, you know, and his name is Ren, but I'm not used to saying Ren, which is why I keep saying Joker. You know, Ren unlocked his first persona, Arsine, or however you're saying that, Arsine. I'm saying Arsine, or I'm calling it Arsine just to be safe. But long story short, it pretty much starts out the same way. Joker gets captured. He's remembered how it all happened, what happened to cause him to live with Sojiro. On his way to school, he sees Anne. Anne actually moves a flower from his hair. And it seems like they're setting some kind of romantic atmosphere between Ren and Anne already, which is kind of interesting because in the game, they don't actually set it up like that per se. You have to like initiate it after spending time and raising your kindness, things like that, to actually romanticize, you know, or romance Anne. So, but it's kind of interesting that they're probably putting a little bit of that in atmosphere upon their first meeting. But it's also cool that right after you meet Anne, you see Kamoshida, which everybody, you know, knows that he's the first big bad guy in Persona 5. And, you know, they wasted no time showing, you know, Kamoshida in the real life, and then also showing Shadow Kamoshida, which is the bad guy version of him in the other world. So right after Kamoshida pulls up, you know, he offers to give Anne a ride, and, you know, she goes and, you know, hops in the car. Of course, Ren, you know, he's new to the school, so he doesn't know who's what, and of course Anne being nice to him, he was flattered, whatever. And then right after that, Ryuju, or Skull, you know, shows up, and he of course is talking trash about Kamoshida. But I like how they subtly made Skull talk about Kamoshida's personality and say that, you know, he pretty much it thinks he's the king of the castle or whatever. And it's funny that that happens right when the app on Joker's phone is present. And if you're unfamiliar with Persona 5, the app that makes you go to the other world, it comes to your phone, and the app is given out by Igor, which I mentioned earlier. So he puts that on the app for people he thinks have a quality to be of use to him. And you know, it comes into play much later on in the season, you know, because Igor is like very like last end of the season type stuff, so I can't really go into too much detail without spoiling that. But long story short, you know, Joker gets the app. He tries to delete it off his phone, but it comes back again, and then it was present when Skull was talking about Kamoshida, and then that allows them to enter the other world. But backing up real quick before I finish that, I did want to point out that when you first go to the school, when Sojiro takes Ren to the school to make sure he gets to school safe and that he doesn't cause any trouble, he meets the principal, but he also meets Kawakami, which Kawakami is his homeroom teacher, and there's a lot of spoiler alert in terms of Kawakami and what you can do in the game in terms of your relation with her and what happens later. But it's kind of funny that they had an Easter egg where Kawakami, she actually dropped the flyer for her nighttime job where she moonlights as a housekeeper, which that comes into play later on. So that was a bit of foreshadowing that they actually showed that in the very first episode. So I feel like they are doing a much better job of making sure everything is precise and everything ties in. There's like no wasted effort. Like every little scene has something to do with either in the future or establishing the character and fleshing out their motives for why they're doing what they're doing. So if you haven't played a game, then you would most likely miss all of this. But for somebody who's spent 60 plus hours in this game so far, like, I know these characters way more than I've ever known any video game characters, period. And you know, that's just tell you how good of a job they've done with the story and the characters in the game. And yes, it's not the most popular game compared to Battle Royale or whatever, but I say without a doubt it's one of the best story driven RPG game I've played in a very long time. You know, and it's just, you really understand why everybody's doing what their motives are, what their character flaws are, what their character strengths are, you know, and you really understand what really ties them all together as Phantom Thieves. So that they did a really good job with that. So that's kind of cool that you see a little foreshadowing with Kawakami and her moonlighting as a nurse when she dropped that flyer, and she immediately of course picked it up being embarrassed and tried to play it off like nothing happened. So, and of course Ren, you know, he's new, he doesn't know any of this, he doesn't know, you know, it's kind of interesting to see Ren now, and as a person who's played with Ren all 50 plus hours in the game, I know what's lying ahead, and I'm curious to see how they're gonna follow that, balance that. In addition, in the game you have multiple dialect choice, so you can respond 3, sometimes 4 different ways. How are they going to do that in the anime? Because in my playthrough, I do a good and a bad playthrough, where I respond like trashy in one playthrough and I respond good in another. So I'm kind of curious to see how they're going to balance that between striking him as being a good, honest type character, or they're going to make him like be disturbed like a Sasuke type character, you know? So that'll be kind of interesting. But long story short, Ren and Skull, or, you know, Joker and Skull, and of course Ren is Joker and Ryuji is Skull. But I'm calling them by their Phantom Thieves nickname for anybody who's confused. So Joker and Skull, you know, this is the first time they're going into the other world, and it's funny because it happens exactly like happened in the game, where they think they walked into the school and they see all these shadows, which are the monsters in the other world, the premonitions that protect the treasure for the person, in this case Kamoshida, and they go in, and of course it plays out exactly the same, where they're like, what's going on, why are we not at school, where's everybody, and of course the shadows attack them and capture them. And this is where it comes to the revelation that they realize, okay, we're not in the school, we're somewhere else that doesn't even look like, you know, Earth, or in this case, Japan. And they are in a cell, and then Kamoshida finally shows up in the most perverse bad guy outfit ever. Like, seriously, he's wearing a thong, a pink thong, with like a coat, like a king's coat covering him, and I'm like, who walks around like that? But it's kind of funny when you first see that in a game, you're like, what the hell is this shit, you know? But to see it in an anime, it just makes it even more comical, you know. Of course, and he's talking trash to Skull, of course, and if you don't know, Kamoshida used to be the coach for Ryuju, aka Skull, and he kicked him off the team. So Ryuju has, animosity towards him because, one, he didn't like the fact that he kicked him off team for not a very good reason, and then two, he knows that Kamoshida has a really bad personality and is probably molesting the female volleyball team. Like, he has theories, but he doesn't know for sure. So, and of course, the reason why Kamoshida has a shadow version of himself is because in real life, he portrays himself to be somebody else. But in reality, in the shadow, he actually molests and has sexual relations with his high school students. So as a result, that creates a dichotomy in his character. And in the other world, if you have such a large enough dichotomy in character, your shadow self, in essence, creates a metaverse in the other world, and it replicates who you truly are. So if somebody's that nefarious and they've grown that out of control with their negative behavior, in this anime, in this game version, whatever, their world is reflected in the other world, and it could be infiltrated by the Phantom Thieves. I know it's very complex, but for the most part, the more you watch, the more you understand how it really plays out. And so, as a result of Kamoshida being, a low life like that in real life, to have sexual relations with his athletes, and then of course be a douche about it, and then just treat a lot of people bad. He's just a really overall bad guy. There's no getting away from that. So it's kind of interesting to see how they are going to reflect that. And so Kamoshida, of course, comes and he threatens them, and Skull is like, let us out of here, whatever, you're nothing. Like, Skull's still talking trash. That's just how he is. And then Kamoshida said, you dare insult the king? How dare you? And that's, recompense for your insultation is going to be death. And so, he sends the shadow in there to attack Skull and Joker. And of course, Skull and Joker can't really do anything right now because, again, this is the first time they're coming to the other world. And they beat, Kamoshida comes to the cell and he starts slapping Ryuji, Skull, with the back of his hand, like keeps slapping him over and over again. And, Skull is, is like a little bit crying, saying that he doesn't want to die, which, that was kind of, it was very, very sad because, to see him, so defiant, but then realizing that he's about to die, he, is very sad, of course. And Joker, unable to do anything, he eventually, and Joker, of course, watching all this, he eventually gets overwhelmed with emotion, and that's when he hears the first persona voice, which is Arsene. Why do I keep saying that wrong? Again, a lot of these names I'm not used to saying out loud, so apologies if I'm saying it incorrect. So he hears his first persona, Arsene, and of course, if you know, the personas come from Igor. They all do. And it's kind of interesting to see how that's going to play out later on. But he hears the first persona, Arsene, and that's when he explodes. They did a good job with the animation showing that Arsene takes over and he has to rip the mask off his face, and then the blood just pours all over his face. But then when he accepts it, the blood retreats back into his eyes, and then it just explodes and he destroys the shadows in the cell. Or at least two of them. He destroyed two of them. I don't know if he destroyed all of them. He destroyed two of them. And then Arsene, he appears, and you see... Oh, and speaking of which, Arsene, they actually showed a glimpse of Arsene earlier in the episode, but you weren't sure exactly who it was, but you could just see the flame in eyes. And so that's like his distinction, is the flame in blue eyes. And so Arsene appears, and that's when he see Joker transform into his persona outfit for the first time, which is a really... You see that in the beginning of the episode too, of course, when he had his outfit, but you see where he first gets it at the end of the episode. So it's a good distinction to see where he was at the beginning and how it all started at the end of the episode. And then that's where the first episode ends. So, really good job of capturing the music, the voice, the plot. Everything seems perfect so far. Like, literally, if this was like a perfect adaptation of a comic book to like a movie or vice versa, this is like a 10 out of 10 because everything matches exactly. There's no distinction between them right now. And I'm kind of curious to see if they're going to still stay on that perfect match the game 100%, or if they're going to start to deviate a little bit and try to bring in a little more elements they're not able to bring into a video game, but they might be able to bring into an anime. For example, of course, in the game you have multiple playthroughs and multiple choice in terms of your conversation choice, whereas in the anime, that might not be an option. They might, of course, they won't show you that, and they'll just, have Ren respond however he needs to respond, but I'm just curious to see how they will make that distinction. Either way, really good job in the first episode. I'm looking forward to watching the second episode and getting a review up. And let me know what you guys, if you already seen the first episode, let me know what you think, especially if you played the game too. Again, this video is meant as a discussion, so if you want to chime in, give your theories, things like that, this is the perfect place to have that type of discussion. Again, thank you guys again for watching this and giving this video a chance, and I will see you guys in my review for episode 2. Bye.